Hello, welcome back to my virtual sofa. It's been a little while. The last time I was sitting on a sofa, you might have seen me at the Stamford Symphony Gala with Michael Stern when we broadcast from the hospital in Stamford. And if you haven't seen the gala presentation, you can still do so at the website, stamfordsymphony.org. I highly recommend it. It's a great program. And we raised an incredible sum. Thank you to everybody who contributed. We've raised nearly 250,000. It's a record. And we're just so grateful to everybody that supported the symphony. Now, on my virtual sofa today is a member of the flute section of Stamford Symphony, Kathleen Nester. She also plays the Piccolo. Kathleen, hello, welcome to my virtual sofa.
Hello, Russell. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. Now, the flute. Were you always a flute player? What attracted you to the flute in the first place?
Well, I grew up in North Haven, Connecticut, and when I was in second grade, I joined the North Haven Fife and Drum Corps. And since I was one of the youngest members, they assigned for me to play the fife. The bass drum was too big for me. But then when I was in fourth grade, we got to pick a band instrument, and I thought, well, I already know how to play a fife, so flute is going to be the next best thing.
And a fife is like a little piccolo, or what is a fife?
A fife is a very simple instrument. It has a place where you blow air, and then 6 holes for your fingers, and it's got a cork at the end. So it's just a very, very simple instrument. It's like an early bamboo flute. This one happens to be wood. The one that I played in the North Haven Fife and Drum Corps was made of metal. And that was good for marching in parades on Saturdays and Sundays when it was raining. So here's the fife.
Now let's go back a bit. Talk about the origins of the flute, because it's actually a very, very ancient instrument, isn't it?
Yes, I think it's probably one of the earliest instruments. Maybe drums are also an early instrument, but flutes have been found that made of wood and stone and bone and bamboo. I have a very basic sort of flute here. This is made of bamboo. You can see the little seam for the bamboo, and it's bound together with thread so that it doesn't crack. And like the fife that I just showed you, it has a place to blow air, and then 6 holes for your flute, for your fingers. And the air goes across the hole, and it also goes down through the tube. And the more fingers you put on the instrument, the longer the tube essentially gets. Actually, a perfect example of this is a pan flute. You see, this pan flute has long bamboo tubes and short ones, and the short ones are very high and the long ones are lower. And with the pan flute, it's the same thing. I blow the air down into the hole, which is plugged at the bottom like a flute would be. And you know, it's a very simple thing. We blow into soda bottles and things and make sounds. That's how you make a sound on a flute. It's just that it's turned sideways.
I was going to ask you that because I think we're all familiar with recorders or oboes or clarinets when you blow into the tube, but
yes,
you actually blow across the hole.
Exactly. Yeah. Here's a recorder. Completely blowing in through the opening up here. But then this bamboo flute, I'll show you, I just blow across this hole, just like I blew across the tubes of the pan flute. So that's very simple, but very pretty, actually.
Now, that must be a very different technique from blowing like an oboist would. Talk about this word nobody understands, embouchure.
Oh, embouchure, yeah. So embouchure is, I consider it sort of my mouthpiece. So again, I can show you with these pan flutes very, very well. I have to sort of frown, but this is really the shape plus the tongue. It makes a valve like a brass instrument. So I have to blow the air down into the hole, into the opening. I actually practice buzzing my lips because that helps me get these muscles toned if I don't have my flute with me. But that's how flutists make a sound, and that's why playing outdoors is very difficult, or in a very drafty orchestra pit, because the sound really comes from here. If I play here and I cover it, there's no sound. So this is really where the source of the sound is, right? Blowing across the hole.
Fascinating, fascinating. And you have to keep your chops in shape, I expect, because that muscle has to keep exercised.
Yes, exactly. Like any other muscle, doing sit-ups or lunges or whatever, you have to exercise these muscles. And as an orchestral player, it's important to have a kind of efficiency, is the way I think about it, because you have to be able to play for long periods of time, and you also have to be able to play in a moment, like playing Piccolo, for example, in a symphony orchestra. Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony is a classic example. I would have to sit through the first movement, the second movement, and the beginning of the third movement before I'd have to play a very high, very exposed excerpt. So it's part of my practice to just practice endurance, which also means staying, with my breathing in good shape. But really, the muscles are very, very important. I remember in Melanie Feld's talk with you, she talked about the air for an oboist goes through a very small reed. Well, so it's a little bit similar for the flute, and it's just that the reed is kind of all the way inside my mouth, and it is my mouth. And then the air has to jump over the space that's open, but it's not dissimilar in that regard.
It's fascinating. I'm a string player. I have no concept of using my body to make a sound. It's very different. Now, you've been showing us wooden tubes and so on, but I see a lot of metal on the piano behind you. Yes. What is the difference between wood and metal flutes?
Well, they make a different sound, and I'll show you. This is a copy of a very early instrument, early flute. Same thing. This is made of boxwood, 6 holes plus the blowhole, but it also has this one key. And this flute would have played music, by Mozart. Mozart would have heard this flute, a flute like this. This is a modern copy. But it's kind of soft. So you can see it's very beautiful, beautiful sound, but it's quiet. And I think it was appropriate for that time. And as composers started writing for larger and larger forces in the symphony orchestra, flute makers started experimenting with different metals. Ivory, glass, and then silver, and nickel and gold.
Could you get away with playing a wooden flute in the modern symphony orchestra and keep that sound? Do people do that?
Yes, and there are wooden flutes with all the keys. All these keys, it's part of the BEM system, and all the woodwind instruments now have some variation on that, where this combination of keys and rods and so forth allows the instrumentalists to play all the notes of the chromatic scale, which of course was really important for the kinds of music that was being written. There are players, I believe the principal player in the Berlin Philharmonic plays a modern instrument that's made out of grenadilla. So it looks like an oboe. It's made out of the same kind of wood. And there are flutists who play on gold and platinum, all sorts of things.
You're holding the flute we're most familiar with,
yes,
which gets played most of the time in a symphony orchestra. But there are 3 others, right?
Well, in the modern flute family, as I like to call it, there are. We have the piccolo, of course. I also have a silver version. It's a little bit different, I think, in the sound. I'll just show it up close. I like to play a wooden piccolo in the symphony orchestra just for the timbre it offers. So that piccolo is a little bit smaller than half the size of the flute, and it sounds an octave higher. And then there's the alto flute, which sounds, when I play a low C, it gives me a low G.
Am I right in thinking French composers really like this instrument? I can hear Debussy and Ravel in what you're playing there.
Yes, in fact, there's a famous solo from Daphnis and Chloe for the alto flute. You recognize that, I'm sure.
Yes, gorgeous, gorgeous. So that's the alto flute.
And that's the alto flute, and it does show up in music of Ravel and Stravinsky and onward. What you don't hear very much in a symphony orchestra is a bass flute, but you probably hear bass flute used in movie scores or television scores. And the bass flute sounds an octave lower, and it's so big
Yeah.
that the designers have turned it around on itself so that the flutist, the player, can balance it.
Now you're renowned for playing the piccolo. You're very much a piccolo specialist, and you played that for us in the symphony. And I remember the Tchaikovsky 4 we did at the opening of the last season. Does everybody have to play piccolo and flute if you're in a symphony orchestra?
Absolutely. Elizabeth Mann, the principal flutist of Stamford Symphony, is a wonderful piccolo player. All professional flutists are expected to be able to play the piccolo, and there's a lot of symphonic repertoire that calls for more than one piccolo player. I happen to really like to play the piccolo, and so I have been drawn to that kind of work and to looking for those kinds of opportunities. And perhaps that's because of my early days as a fifer. Who knows?
Now, this is the perfect segue because we're going to actually hear you play a piccolo concerto at a program we're going to broadcast on Sunday, December the 20th at 3:00. Tell us what you're going to play at that program.
Yes, a few weeks ago, I had the great opportunity to record the Vivaldi C Major Piccolo Concerto with Maestro Stern and the members of the Stamford Symphony Orchestra. It was so great to see everyone and perform with everyone. We had one rehearsal and then we recorded it, and it's going to be live streamed on December 20th, and I hope you'll enjoy it. It was a wonderful experience. I mean, in the days of COVID here, it was really great to be performing live with my colleagues.
I was lucky enough to be with you at that recording. It was beautiful. It's a great little piece, and we're pairing the concerto with some brass music played by our brass quintet on the 20th of December at 3:00 in a program that we call Venetian Holiday, and we've got some holiday favorites and some Gabrielli and so on. So we're very much looking forward to that. Kathleen, thank you for showing us your flutes and talking us through the family of flutes. And we'll look forward to seeing you on December the 20th.
Thank you so much, Russell.